Welcome to the Charge podcast. Marketing teams today are often siloed and spread thin across platforms, priorities, and departments. But after Charge North America 2025, one thing is clear. When you align your team under a shared mission, you don't just market, you lead. Today, we're exploring thought leadership ads, a strategy that brings creative and technical marketers together to build brand credibility and business results. But before we jump into all of that, I'd like to introduce you to our guest, Jacob Lundy. He brings a decade of marketing experience with an emphasis on clean energy, and he's been featured on things like Clean Power Hour, Energy Tech Media, and the What's Up Solar podcast, where he's provided growth marketing advice that has saved companies over $5 million in advertising spend. Welcome, Jacob. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Great to have you be here. And I believe you were recently at Charge North America as a first timer. Tell us a little bit about that and what was your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway for Charge in Houston was that we're just not alone in this clean energy transition as marketers. I think what happens with these climate tech startups and other teams is we get so siloed doing our work in the day-to-day grind that this event really just brings like-minded individuals together. And I think that was just like such a strong piece that resonated with me, and it gave me a lot of energy and remotivated me to be in this industry.
Good to hear that. So I think going back to the intro, why do you think that marketing teams, often feel like they're being pulled in so many different directions?
I think part of it comes down to when we think about marketing, there's so many things you can do. It's not just content or email or social media or paid media. There's so many facets that you can be part of a marketing team. And so what happens is we all kind of get our tendencies. And I'll start with myself as more of a technical marketer. I'm looking at the performance of campaigns, what's actually working, what's driving leads, what's filling the sales pipeline, and what's ultimately leading to revenue and increasing a bottom line. But then you look on the more creative and branding side, and it's not that those individuals don't care about the things that a technical marketer does, but they have a keen outlook on the ability to understand what evokes emotion in the copy, the graphics, the overall brand experience. And so you get these kind of push and pull as we try and work together in teams sometimes, where the technical marketers say, we want to focus on the results. We don't do quite as well maybe on the creative, and then vice versa. You get more of a creative lens and there's less of an emphasis on the results. And so the idea with what's called thought leader ads on LinkedIn is that you can build thought leaders in your clean energy company, and you can make it have a brand look and feel that's aligned with your C-suites and your overall brand strategy, but also is going to be popped into the performance component where you might build like a multiple stage funnel to drive leads for your organization.
Can you tell me a bit about what the typical symptoms are you see when marketing teams lack the unified direction? Kind of what have you seen in the past?
Yeah, things I've seen either managing teams or working collaboratively with teams is that when there's not a unified direction and kind of piece that draws everyone together, you often get people who get disassociated and they're just doing the bare minimum. And that's really unfortunate because, especially in an industry like clean energy, and it's really revolved around people who are really passionate about the industry. They're really passionate. They care about our world. They care about sustainability. And so when you see that disassociation because of lack of unification, whether that's because you don't have a cohesive strategy telling you what you're trying to achieve as a team collectively, or it might be just top down leadership issues from the hierarchy that might cause ripples within your team, it takes away from that passion. And I've seen it firsthand, unfortunately, that it can affect individuals. And what you really want in the team is you want to be working collaboratively regardless of your background, technical, creative, regardless of the leadership style of your manager, because at the end of the day, we're really all trying to come together to make a difference in the world.
And how would you say that this fragmentation can impact campaign performance and overall team morale?
Yeah, it can impact campaign performance because when you're not waking up every day ready to give your blood, sweat, and tears for an organization, it's a very different feeling than you waking up and just realizing it's a paycheck. If you want those people on your team who come in and they're ready to give it their all because they care about a unified mission. And just going back to the charge community, I think that's one thing that's so beautiful about the community is like everyone is like-minded. We're all here for the same reason.
So you've obviously spoken a lot about thought leader ads through LinkedIn. I think maybe it would be good, I certainly don't know a lot about LinkedIn thought leaders and how they're unique to brand storytelling. So can you tell us what exactly are they and how are these different to your more traditional LinkedIn advertising or marketing?
When we think about Google ads or meta ads and we see it on our feed or our Google searches, we see a company. And if we don't know the company, it's really, really, really hard up front to build trust, right? If you're deciding if you want to buy sustainable laundry detergent and you've used a different laundry detergent in your entire life, how is that company brand going to convince you to switch to this new laundry detergent? And so there's friction because it's person to company and there's not a real connector there. The difference with thought leader ads, specifically on LinkedIn, is it allows you to take a LinkedIn profile. So it could take your profile or mine, something we post on our personal profile, and it can sponsor it and associate it with your company name, but it's so subtle, right? It's going to say Jacob Juan Carlos Lundy, and then in very small text, sponsored by X, Y, and Z. And so the beauty in that is you're getting in front of the right decision makers with authentic content that's telling a real story from a real person. And so that's why it's so powerful because then you're getting the brand and creative component. And then if you're in clean energy, and you're an EPC trying to reach CNI developers, for example, and there's maybe only a couple hundred in the US that you can reach, you target those CNI developers and you ensure that the decision makers are seeing your content from your sales team and from your C-suite. So as a marketer, it's a twofold play because I should even say threefold because it brings together your team and there's more collaboration. It also allows you to more effectively target your key audience. And then finally, it also helps with political capital because then your sales team is advocating for you because you're making the heroes of the story. They're now telling the story instead of just the company.
And how would you achieve the sweet spot between authentic thought leadership and marketing objectives? How do you do that?
The way to do that, in my opinion, is you got to have both pieces. You got to have the creative on your team and you got to have the performance on your team. If you just have the creative, there's sometimes lacks direction on the ability to go into the depths of technical marketing. And if you just have technical marketing, it's the other way. There might be a lack of creative direction there. And that's not bad, right? Everyone has their strengths, and we as humans need to leverage each other for other strengths. And that's how we grow together as a marketing team in a clean energy organization. And so the sweet spot is like when you're running these thought leader ads to have constant collaboration to talk about, is this really telling the right brand story we're looking for? And is it driving the results? And to give you context, an example 3 funnel stage for the more technical marketers out there and maybe the salespeople interested is like you put the thought leaders, those ads at the top. That's the first ad people see. And then when you get to the second stage, that's when you start to incorporate the educational content like ebooks, downloadable content, newsletter subscription on LinkedIn. And then when you finally get to the bottom, now you've already built the trust. When you get to the bottom, that's when you get the luxury to ask for the demo, the buying a ticket, the whatever it may be that you're advertising.
And for all of those content strategists out there who are always looking for kind of what media works best, what, in your opinion, drives the most results or the best results for running these thought leadership ads? Because I'm sure many of us out there have actually never tried this or didn't even really know how to go about developing it.
So There's a couple different formats. You can do an image that you've put on a post that you have, and you can also do a video. And luckily, generally speaking, there's a lot of emphasis now on LinkedIn for video content. Within the last few weeks, they recently made it public that all video formats will get some sort of feed and weight to it. So whether you do it like you would see in an Instagram story, you do a wide version, or you do a square version, they just really want video content on their platform. And the nice thing about video content too is it builds trust, it builds connection, because then you're seeing an individual, the way they communicate, you're understanding who they are as a person. I think it's one of the reasons why influencer marketing is so popular across many industries, is because it's not just a company name, it's an actual human being.
And how do these types of ads compare to your normal other standard LinkedIn ads?
Yeah, so this question is great, getting a little bit more into the nuts and bolts here. When you think about average industry cost per click on an ad, roughly speaking, I've heard from other influencers, it's around $7 to $10 cost per click. And that would be on the good end for a company ad. When you look at thought leader ads, though, the cost per click is $1 to $2. So now you're paying significantly less to target people, build that audience, build that trust in the top of the funnel. And then as you get later on, you can give them, again, the content from the company for a demo, to buy a ticket, whatever it is.
And I'm going to catch you off guard here because I know we haven't discussed this and it's just come into my head now. But why do you think that this is such an underutilized avenue of using LinkedIn? Why do you think no one has really thought about it, or are there some great brands and people out there that are actually excelling at this place, at this type of thought leadership ads? What do you think the barriers to entry are around it?
It's a mixed bag. And I think it comes from the notion that paid media, particularly LinkedIn, is extremely expensive. And it can be. I don't want to sugarcoat that the platform can be expensive, but there are strong hacks that can allow you to save thousands of dollars. I talked on another podcast where we looked at an example in my career, and we saved a company $1,400 within 1 week, where we didn't change anything on the creative, on the copy, on the audience targeting. Everything was the same except for the bidding strategy. And so one of them had what's called an automated bidding strategy, and one had a manual bidding strategy. The automated would charge for the impression. That's just a fancy way to say an ad view. Somebody scrolls on your feed, they see the ad, and the other one charges for the click. And so people don't realize that the one that's automatically chosen is the automated bidding, which charges as soon as people see the ad. And so it's going to eat up your budget very quickly. And when you think about it from a business opportunity perspective, it makes sense, because LinkedIn is enticing people to spend money on their platform to utilize their advertising capabilities. It's arguably the number one B2B marketing tool out there right now. If you start with a manual bid, though, you can save money very quickly. That case study of $1,400 in 1 week equated to around $73,000 saved in a year. And so again, when you're trying to understand, is this really cost effective? It's also important to weight, what is your end goal? If you're selling a product that's a SaaS tool for developers and it's $30,000 for every new client you get just for the first year, maybe it's not a bad thing to be able to spend $10,000 to actually get that client to the door, because it's still a 3-to-1 return on investment the first year. And then that lifetime customer value will skyrocket if you continue to manage them well. So some things to consider, but that's usually the first barrier of friction, is people just think it's expensive.
Very true. I mean, I'm one of those. I for sure sometimes think, gosh, I'm not seeing such a great result in my campaign. I'm not seeing any people respond. We've kind of trial and tested so many things. So it definitely does have a barrier to entry. So that makes perfect sense. And I think it's good to know that it doesn't have to be you. There are lots of ways out there, and people like you that can help and advise in that capacity. So I think, kind of looking now into building who these energy thought leaders are, what would you say makes someone, to be classified an energy thought leader? versus just a regular thought leader? I mean, a lot of people like to classify themselves as thought leaders and write great articles on LinkedIn. How do you differentiate the two?
I think in general, the best thought leaders out there, the true ones, they do two things. The first thing they do is they have a sense of humility and they talk and try new things that they might not always be comfortable with. And it builds trust because thought leadership and engagement with your brand as an individual is all about trust. And the second one is they tell great stories. Like we as humans, we can think logically, but at the end of the day, we make decisions based off emotions. It's like, am I going to hire this person? Do they have the right skills? And do I like them? Am I going to work with this agency? Do I know the person? Do I like them? Do our kids go to school together? It's that personal connection we're really looking for that drives our decisions as humans. And so when we think specifically on energy, I think it's pairing that with some of the technical things that are happening in the industry. So if you think about clean energy, there's so many great resources that you can use to learn about the industry. And I can just talk my own experience. It's like jumping into it a few years ago, not knowing much about the industry, reading Solar Wake Up or other news publications that allow you to digest what a developer is, what an EPC is, what an OEM is in the industry, how they communicate on the project lifecycle. So it's everything a thought leader is. And then you also add in some of the technical pieces. But again, at the end of the day, people don't always want just tech savvy. They want people who talk about innovations, what's going to happen next in the industry. What do you think is going to happen next? Where do you think we're going to go? People they can trust and lean onto so they know how to better position their own business. That's why they go to thought leaders in the first place.
And how do you develop good thought leadership content that really resonates with the target audience or the people that you're trying to target? How do you go about that?
From my experience, it's really focusing on providing true educational content with no initial intent of closing a deal, anything like that. It's you want to provide value to somebody so they can trust you. And once you build that trust, then later comes the deals close, comes the communication as clients, those things as they become advocates for you. They got to like you and they got to trust you and you got to be knowledgeable on that topic. And so when you're creating this thought leadership content, just think about like, if I was researching for the first time and I wanted to know something about the industry, if I read what you were writing, would that provide that to me? And if it does, it's probably a pretty strong thought leadership content strategy.
And I think, yeah, when you were talking about being sold at the deal, click here, learn more, buy this. Naturally, there are a lot of mistakes that are made out there with these types of things. And I think people are way more aware that these things happen and what they're trying to get out of you, so they kind of ignore it. What are some of the biggest mistakes companies can make when trying to build these thought leaders? How do we make sure that they are being built up and we're developing it for the right avenue that we want it for?
I think one thing that can almost paralyze people in the C-suite or at any stage in a company to become a thought leader is the notion that you have to have everything completely original. There's so much content out there that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. You have to understand what the wheel is and then tell them what you think about how that wheel rolls and functions. I think a great example is just this past week, I was learning about what a speculative developer is as opposed to like maybe a more well-trusted developer, one focused on just a quick buck to flip a data center project, for example, as opposed to one who's got proper financing and has addressed community sentiment in their region. And so I had never heard that term. And I think for me, it was actually exciting because I got to learn in the process from an article, an opinion piece by Utility Dive. And so it's not reinventing the wheel every time. And I think the other piece too is if you don't know something, just don't be afraid to ask or like end a piece of content with, what are your thoughts on this? This is my perspective. Because then it takes away the pressure to say, I know exactly this is right for a fact. It creates dialogue between other individuals in the community.
It's obviously, very clear that you know a lot about this and you're an expert in your field and you've taken the time to, look into it, research, learn what you haven't. what would be a few great LinkedIn hacks that you could share with our audience that they could implement in their marketing efforts from tomorrow?
Yeah, I would say number one, if you haven't used it, you got a company page using LinkedIn follower tokens. You get 250 every month. It's great if you're building your brand from the ground up because it allows you to invite decision makers to your company page who then see your content. So your content isn't just in this black void that isn't getting showcased. I think that's another big notion is some people think if you simply post on social media, people will see it and the right people will come. That's unfortunately not always the case. Another one that's really great on the paid media side, and it gets a lot of people their foot in the door, is something called text ads. And so they're these little ads that follow you on your desktop feed. And the beauty of them, if you use the website visits campaign objective and you pay for the click instead of the impression, it's a nice little hack that a lot of the top influencers know because it equates to essentially free brand awareness. And a case study I've done with a climate tech startup in my career was we drove 500,000 ad views to developers, asset owners, EPCs, engineers, consultants for under $100. So it's really cost effective to drive 500,000 ad views for under $100 as opposed to other ad formats that might be significantly higher in the tens of thousands of dollars to get that same exposure initially. And it's also great for political capital because then you go to your executive team as a marketing leader and you say, hey, we're driving results for low cost. If you give us more budget, we can do even more. We can go even further. We can go deeper and we can really make a difference in our bottom line. It's a great entry point for that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jacob. I think this, it's been excellent. I've certainly learned a lot myself. It's great to know the features that LinkedIn offer and how one can use it to the best of their advantage, and we don't just have to be pushing content on a weekly basis. It's obviously clear, that you are an expert in your field. Like I said, you've learned a lot about this. If we wanted to, if people wanted to reach out to you to get you on board, to help, to advise, to offer solutions, how can they do that? Where can they find you? And what what would the next steps be in terms of what they should do next?
Yeah, I appreciate that recap. So I am currently on the market and I'm not sure for how long, but I think the best way to reach me is that you can find me at Jacob Juan Carlos Lundy. That's JuanCarlosLundy on LinkedIn. You'll see on my banner that I've mentioned the 500,000 ad views for under $100. I've built companies at my own, two of them, Marketergy being one of them, working with clean energy companies and working in the climate tech space. So I do freelance work, also full-time capacity. And if anyone's interested, just to come say hi and do a casual coffee chat online too, I'm always down for that as well.
Thank you so much. I wish you all the best. Appreciate your time out of your busy day to join us today at Charge. And we look forward to having you back to join us for many Charge conferences in the future. And who knows, maybe you'll even be up on stage giving a talk about LinkedIn and kind of all you've learned, because I do think this is an area that is severely under-focused and is something that we all use daily. We go on LinkedIn every day, we catch up with news, we see what's happening, see who's got a new job. So I certainly think it's an area to watch. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.